Okay, a good day to all the Matrics and welcome to the catch-up class, focusing on the core topics, theoretic topics for term 2, and also citing all of the unrest across our city. It's deemed necessary to use this avenue to reach out to you with regard to the content that needs to be covered for computer application technologies. So in these sessions or these online classes, we will try and focus more on the theoretical contents, and before the call back to school, we'll also try and look at some practical lessons as well, when we'll be looking at our HTML, Excel spreadsheets, and so on and so forth. But today I will be focusing on internet connections and services. And this is our module 2.1, which is scheduled to be taught in term 2. So what does this module entail? We are going to introduce the topic to you, and we will be looking at internet connections. And under internet connections, we'll be looking at the internet service provider, the criteria for types of internet connections that we may need at our homes, at our offices, at schools, at government departments, and so on and so forth. And then we'll look at when do we go wired connection and when should we use wireless connection. And we'll weigh out on the pros and cons of these connections. And then we'll also look at internet access using smartphones and tablets. Furthermore, we're going to also look at the internet services, when we'll look at real-time messaging, VoIP, which is a voice over IP, video conferencing, cloud computing, online storage, file sharing, grid computing, and then we'll focus lastly on the government internet services that we use. But may I bring it to your attention, grade 12s, that terminologies on the internet services like real-time messaging, VoIP, video conferencing, cloud computing, online storage, file sharing, grid computer are concepts that are always tested in your November exam, which is your final Matric exam. So as we go in the lesson, I would want you to ensure that you have a clear understanding of what all of these terminologies stand for. And thereafter, once we're done with the teaching, we would test and improve our knowledge. I've actually added a test yourself self-marking assessment onto the Google Classroom. So once we're done with this module, I would encourage you to go and tackle those questions. Just try and aim at them and ensure that you can answer most of the questions that you will find on that self-marking online test. So let's go. So just basically what forms the major part of this module, which is network technologies, is the almighty internet. And when we talk about internet, I believe this is not a new concept to us any longer. Me being able to teach you and share this content with you is because of the power of internet. So internet is becoming a known concept to everyone. And at these very areas where we are trying to push internet to become part of our basic rights. So what do we mean as the internet? The internet is a worldwide computer network consisting of computers and devices and networks linked using some form of communication media. So think about computers sitting in our classrooms, in many schools, in many government departments, at home affairs, at the educational departments, at companies and businesses, and think about them as being linked together in a network using some sort of communication media. That's exactly what the internet is. So with the power of cable, with the power of wireless computers across the world, sitting in different buildings across the world, are now able to communicate with one another. And that's exactly what we mean by the internet. So when I'm being able to look for an information about the United States via Google, via search engines, then I am making use of the internet. When I try and place phone calls, like we do with our WhatsApp calls, over our phones to computers, over our phones to other smartphones, then we are making use of the internet. So the internet is a very useful or a greater phenomenon now that you find amongst the human race, which enables us to be able to carry out communications amongst ourselves between computers much easily than what it used to be many years ago. So under the internet, we have various types of network that allows or forms the framework of the internet. So the internet is just not one thing. The internet is laptops, tablets, smartphones, all sitting across the world, all being linked together. And for all of these links to actively communicate with one another, they need what you call networks. So the first set of networks that we'll look under this network technology model is the WAN. The WAN stands for a wide area network. If you remember in grade 10 and 11, we covered concepts like the LAN, which is the local area network. And we said the LAN, which is a local area network, are networks that are formed around a small area. For example, in the cat lab, that is an example of a local area network. But when we talk about a wide area network, we're talking about a network that's spread over a wide geographical area, such as a city, country, or even continent. So for example, if we talk about the city of Cape Town network, if we look at the footage cameras that are now being networked over our city and placing them into network, then we're talking about a wide area network. So it is a network that is spread over a wide geographical area, such as your city, country, and even continent. So examples of organizations or companies or firms that make use of a wide area network are businesses and shops, because think about it, Woolworth, it's in many areas in our community. So Woolworth needs to ensure that all of their computers can communicate. So for them to communicate, those computers has to be interconnected into what we call a wide area network. Another example is your bank. We have standard banks everywhere we go. We have FMB everywhere we go. So those computers need to speak to one another. They've got to communicate with one another. And that is why those banks would ensure that the computers are connected on a wide area network. And also, when we go beyond that, we also have the internet. The internet is also an example of a wide area network, and the reason for that is there are networks, there are various local area networks, there are various WAN that forms the framework of the internet. That is why, in other words, we sometimes say that our internet is a greater area network. The G here means for a greater, beyond your wide area network. So it's talking about a greater area network. So that's an example of another one. So, but most importantly, what you need to put at the back of your mind is when banks connect their computers together, then we talk about the wide area network. So think about network that spreads over a wide geographical area, such as your city, such as your country, or even your continent. Those are the type of network that we refer to as a wide area network. Okay, so when we talk about communications, we mentioned earlier on that the internet communicates with computers and devices across the world using some form of communication media. Now, when we refer to those communication media, then we are talking about internet connections. Okay, so when I have internet connection at my home, I am part of a wide area network, which means I can communicate from Cape Town to Lagos. From Lagos, I can contact London. And that is why we're all connected with the power of internet connection. So let's look furthermore on the internet connection. What are we talking about here? For this to happen, for internet connections to happen, we need people that we call the internet service provider. They are the companies or the IT companies that ensure this communications to happen. So in other words, ISPs, which we refer to as an internet service provider, are a company that has a permanent or a fast connection to the internet. And what they do is they sell these internet access and services to people, to end users like me and you for a monthly fee. So think about your MTN, think about your Telcom, think about your Vumatech, think about your Frog Post, think about all of these internet service providers that we find around us. They are companies who's bought what we call a broadband, a permanent connection from bigger internet service provider from across the world. And what they do is they geographically within our city, within our community, sell this internet access to end users like me and you so that we can have access to the internet. Okay, so that's exactly what we mean by an ISP. So always remember this. It's a concept that is also tested mostly in the national paper. What is an ISP? You can always remember that an ISP is that company that has a permanent and fast connection to the internet and that sells internet access and services at a monthly fee. So you have to pay a monthly fee to these companies that we call the ISPs in order for you to have internet connection, in order for you to have a fast and reliable internet connection. Okay, so let's just quickly look at examples of ISPs that we have. Telkom is a major one that we all know about in South Africa. We talk about Vodacom, which is also quite popular. We talk about MTN. We talk about Hemweb, which is also very popular. ATA, which is under Telkom. And nowadays, we even have the ones that provide fiber access to our home, which are known as Vumatel. Some of them are known as Frog Post. Some of them are known as even Telkom, a subsidiary of Telkom, also provide the fast and reliable fiber access to our home now. So those are examples of ISPs, internet service providers, that you would find in South Africa. Okay. Now, what services do we really get from the ISPs? What sort of services do they render to us as end users? And please bear in mind, when I use the word end users, I'm talking about people at the receiving end of the internet. We are the people who buy monthly access so that we can check our Facebook, so that we can check our emails. That is why we use the word end user. We are at the receiving end of ISP services. So services that they do render to us, most of the time you'll find email. That is why me and you can check our emails easily. We will find a web page hosting, which means they're able to assist us in hosting our website. That is why when I say visit the website of a school, it means it's a page or a collection of web pages that are being hosted by a service provider, internet service provider. Then they also provide what we call a wireless or the wired internet access to us. On our smartphone, we receive wireless internet access. So that is why you don't see me and you carrying around cables when we need to check our emails on our smartphone, when we need to check our WhatsApp messages on our smartphone, because we use wireless internet access. But when you want to talk about the wired internet access, then you're talking about the ADSL lines or the ADSL internet services or the fiber internet services that are being provided by these ISP. So that is what we mean by wireless and wired internet access. But in the later course of this teaching, we will touch a little bit on wireless and wired internet connection and why do we decide on which to use. All right. Then also ISPs also provide what we call fax to email. I know fax is a technology that is becoming extincted. It's a technology that is no longer being widely used amongst us anymore, but still they can still provide you with a fax line. But the only thing is you would not need a physical fax machine to have a fax to email, because what happens is when people dial your fax number to send a fax over to you, you would receive this fax document in your email. So that is why we call it a fax to email and no longer a fax to a fax, which it used to be many years ago. ISPs also provide us with what we call the spam filtering, which is able to filter away spam emails. We say spam emails are on unwanted emails that we receive on our email, and sometimes they take up space on our email, and they make us run out of space when it comes to our email account. So what most internet service provider does is they give you what you call a spam filtering service, which allows a filter service over your email, so the unwanted emails don't eventually end up in your inbox. So these are all sort of services that you can get most of the time from your internet service providers. Okay. But again, when we want to think of internet connection, we have to probe our minds and check what sort of internet connection will be most suitable for our use. For example, I know after grade 12, many of you will be moving on into varsity or into colleges to move further into your life, with your life. Then you would have to make certain decisions around what type of internet connections do I really need? Because you're going to be a student, you're going to be mobile, you're going to be moving from one class to another. There you would definitely see that you don't need a wired connection or a wired internet connection. You definitely would require a wireless internet connection, citing your mobility, citing the reason that you would have to move from one point to another. So whenever we want to decide on internet connection, even if you have to decide on internet connection for your own home at home, or for your parent or anybody around you who knew that you were a cat learner and that you could help with this sort of decisions, then you need to ask people certain questions, which means there must be some sort of criteria to look into in order for you to decide on what is the best type of internet connection that you require. So most people prefer what you call a broadband. A broadband is similar to a high-speed fiber access that we now have at our home. I believe you've been hearing a lot of people talking about fiber internet access. That's a new thing that we've got recently in South Africa. And we're able to transmit data at a very higher speed than what it used to be in the past. So when you look at logically, if you ask anybody what sort of internet connection would you prefer, most of them will say, well, I prefer the high speed one. So that's what brings a terminology called broadband. So a broadband is a high speed, high bandwidth connection to the internet. So again, let's re-emphasize on that. It's a high speed, which means at a very higher data rate. Data is being transmitted over this internet connection. High bandwidth, which means you're able to get more data across, you're able to get more people connected over your connection into the internet. So think about a home, like we all under lockdown now, and we have a family of 5, and we all need access to internet over our mobile smartphones. We all need access to the internet on our personal laptops. The TV in the lounge is also a smart TV. The TV in the room is also a smart TV, which also require quite a lot of data use in order to connect to the internet. So that is why for a case like what you find around me here as your teacher, you would actually find that I would prefer a broadband. I would prefer a very high speed, high bandwidth connection into the internet. So I just want you to ensure that you understand those terminologies properly. High speed means at a faster data rate. And when we talk about high bandwidth, means being able to upload and download at a faster rate. So if you're on a high bandwidth connection, you're able to get more data up into the internet, and at the same time you're able to download more data from the internet. So that is what the word bandwidth refers to, the ability of an internet connection to be able to upload higher data rates and also download higher data rates at the same time. So that is what our broadband means. But later on, again, we'll touch a little bit on those concepts so that we can again enrich your knowledge when it comes to that. So criteria to look out for when you need to get internet connection. I mean, basically when you go to Telkom and to MTN and you want an internet connection, these are sort of questions that they would ask you in order for for you to get the best possible service from the service provider. So the first thing is mobility. The question is, do you want to be stationary? Do you want to be in one place? Or are you going to be moving from one place to another? So a businessman, for example, will prefer to have a wired network. We prefer to have a stationary connection because they are not moving around. You see, they are not moving from one place to another. Shop is opening in one venue. They've got everything operating in one venue, so they don't worry about mobility. But for you, who perhaps in the future will be going into varsity, you're going to have to move among campuses. You're going to have to move from home to your school, to your university campus. You're going to have to move from one classroom to another. So for your own use, definitely you would require mobility, which means you must try and access or buy a wireless internet connection. The other criteria is the speed. What do you need the internet connection for? Is it for business? Is it for personal use? Is it for gaming? Is it for live streaming of videos and content over the internet? So the what you're going to use the internet connection for will determine the speed of the line or the connection that you would require from your internet service provider. So that's when we talk about the speed or the connection, the speed of my line, the amount of data that I can download and upload at any given time. Then another criteria to look for is what we call the cap. So it's a popular word now that you find among internet service provider when they talk about we're giving you an uncapped internet connection, which means you are not restricted. That is what the word cap means. Uncapped means, I beg your pardon. But when we talk about capped, it means you are pegged at a particular speed. You cannot go more than that. But when you're uncapped, it means you are limitless. You can upload and download as much as you like. But when you're capped, sometimes you've got to be very careful because you may run out of data if you are using your internet connection more than what you should be doing. So an example of a cap connection you would have seen on the TV when Telkom will say, we'll give you 20 gig day and 20 gig midnight serve internet connection, which means you are capped to 20 gig of data in the day and capped to 20 gig of data also in the night. So the moment you have exhausted those data, then obviously you would have to pay further or you have to buy more data in order for you to still maintain your internet connection. But when we talk about uncapped, which is the opposite of cap, we're talking about a limitless internet access, which means you can go on, be connected 24/7, you can download and you can upload as much as you like. Okay, but again, there is this new concept that is now coming out, which we call the shaped and unshaped. And I really want to carefully explain this concept to you. So shaped means you will be tunneled in a certain way in a particular time of a day. So take, for example, when you have a shaped internet connection, okay, that simply means that at a particular hour, so take, for example, businesses operate between the hour of 8 in the morning till 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the evening. If you have a shaped internet access, it simply means that during those business hours, your internet access will be shaped. It will be limited, and priority will be given to businesses around you because your internet connection is shaped. It allows a certain or a limit of internet access during a particular time. But when we talk about unshaped simply means that you are not limited at any given time. So be careful when you go out there to purchase internet access that you carefully understand those terminology. Sometimes they will say it's uncapped and unshaped. That's a very good, reliable internet connection, which means you are not limited to amount of download and upload that you can do. That's why we refer to the word uncapped. And at the same time, you're also not limited in terms of business hours or the time that you can access the internet. So a good internet connection, if you are a business or if you're someone who is a heavy internet user, I would always recommend that you go for an uncapped and an unshaped internet access. But if you're someone that basically are not bothered, you're not always online during the peak times, the best to go for is perhaps a capped connection to a 20 gig a month or the 40 gig a month, and then a shaped internet connection, because then a capped and shaped internet connection will cost you lesser to what an uncapped and an unshaped internet access will cost you. So you have to weigh your options when it comes to that. Do I go for a capped and shaped, or do I go for an uncapped and an unshaped internet access? But I can tell you an uncapped and an unshaped internet access at this very current time are quite expensive. So you have to weigh in your options when it comes to this very important concept. So please have a clear understanding of this, and also when you go over those self-marking online test, and also when you go over your end of a chapter activity, you would find these terminologies as question, and I want you to please ensure that you have a clear understanding of these concepts. Okay, let's move on. Again, we also need to decide on, sometimes, do we go wired connection or do we go wireless connection? So let me give you an example of what wired connections are. So wired connections I mentioned earlier on is your ADSL. So your ADSL, which in the past we get from Telecom, we get from Hemweb, which always require that we have a landline telephone line in order for us to have this kind of internet access. Or we could talk about the fiber internet access, the fiber optic internet access, which is now popular in our suburbs. So those are the two major type of wired connections that we have presently in South Africa. So what does ADSL means? ADSL is asymmetric digital single line. Those glossary or terminologies is being breakdown for you in another sheet, which I will also upload onto the Google Classroom, so that you can always have access to those terminologies. But make it simple for yourself. It's called ADSL. If you cannot remember the full name, it's a permanent, look at that word, permanent digital connection to the internet using a normal telephone line. That's why I mentioned earlier on that you would require a telephone line from Telkom in order for you to be able to have an ADSL internet access at home. So what they do with this type of connection is they split them into two channels. One will be for your phone calls and the other one will be for your internet, which is a great concept. I tell you, many years when we started using the internet, there was nothing called the ADSL. We had what to call a dial-in or a dial-up connection. So at that time, it was impossible to split between your phone call and your internet access. So what I mean by that is when you're on surfing or when you are busy on the internet and someone telephone or ring your landline, your internet access drops immediately, because at that time it was only one channel. Remember, if you look at the word here, it says split into two channels. At that time, when we used the dial-up connection many years ago, we had one channel. Is it for the phone or for the internet? So you couldn't use these two media transmission channels at the same time. But thank goodness for technology now. Under the ADSL connection, we're now able to split into two channels, which means we can have the phone call at the same time, and at the same time we have our internet access going. And that's a typical environment is a school of VoIP. If you look at the environment, we use the ADSL internet connection. So people, millennials on the phone, everybody's busy on the phone, and at the same time we are also busy on the internet. So that's the power of ADSL. But another most very useful data transmission channel that we've now recently received in the country is what we call the fiber wired connection. The fiber wired connection is I would say 100 times more faster than normal ADSL internet connection. They're both a digital connection, but data is transmitted along a thin glass fiber tubes. That is why we call them a fiber. A fiber tube, it's a thin glass layers of glass that you find, and it's much faster than our electrical transmission over copper cables, which is used in the ADSL. So in other words, data is transmitted at the speed of light over these thin glass fibers. And that is why data transmission rate on the fiber internet connection is up to 1,000 megabits per second. So which means it's a high speed internet connection as compared to our ADSL connection, which can only transfer about 100 megabit per second. So just look at it. We could transfer data in 10 more folds over a fiber than what would have over ADSL connection. That is why the ADSL connection is now being pushed out of use, and currently more and more people are subscribing for the fiber internet connection at home and at their places of work. All right, so that's the two thing about the wired connection. But remember that when we talk about this internet connection, you are buying this internet access from your ISP. And if I may remind you what ISP stands for again, it's the Internet Service Provider. So you are buying a monthly internet access from this ISP. So it's up to you. You can decide to do a monthly ISP cost or a fixed monthly cost for the line renter on your ADSL. So what I mean by that is if you're using ADSL, remember you will still have to pay your ISP for the internet connection, and at the same time you still have to pay telecom for your line renter, because you need a line renter, you need a line in order for you to combine that with the technology from the ISP in order for you to be connected to the internet. So always bear in mind that all of this connection comes at a cost, a monthly ISP cost, which is to your service provider, and also a fixed monthly cost for your line renter from telecom. All right, what are the advantages or the limitations with this internet connection? ADSL, the first thing, this is cheaper than a cellular connection. Bear in mind, if we're still going to access internet on our cell phone, on our smartphone, it's still somewhat sort of expensive. But with ADSL connection, it's way cheaper than what you would find on a cellular connection. Cellular, we mean a smartphone connection. Cellular, we means our 3G, our 4Gs, and 2Gs, and so on and so forth. ADSL speed drops the further you are away from the exchange. So that's another sort of limitation. The further you are from the exchange. This exchange means a base station that your service provider has in your area, in your community. For example, you would have seen many of a telecom van at the corner, in your communities where they're busy fixing cables. That is what we refer to as the exchange. So that is where they send signal to your connection at home. So if you're further away from that, your speed will drop when you are using ADSL connection. ADSL and fiber, let's look at the advantages and disadvantages or limitations around that. Our fiber internet connections are more stable. Both ADSL and fiber are much more stable than a cellular connection. We don't easily lose connection on our ADSL and fiber, where as compared to a cellular or a smartphone connection. When you're on your smartphone connection, sometimes you don't find signal. Sometimes if you're in a building, for example, at school level, in certain classrooms, the cellular coverage is very weak. So if the cellular coverage is very weak, definitely that will affect the speed of your internet access. So the same apply. But when it comes to ADSL and fiber, you are not prone to that, which means you have a much stable internet connection than your cellular connections now. Okay, let's focus a little bit more on fiber. Fiber is faster, it's cheaper, it's more stable than ADSL or cellular. So to a certain degree, a fiber is way the most fastest and the cheaper and the most stable network or internet access that you can have over ADSL, over a cellular network. And lastly, fiber internet access are also not prone to electrical interference. When I mean electrical interference between your telephone line, your copper connection, and your electrical equipment at home. When you have fiber internet access, they're not subjective, let's use that word, to electrical interference. Okay, so that's a good thing. So if you want to remember many of these advantages. And when I say give me 2 advantages of fiber over our ADSL connection, you would say number 1 is faster, it's cheaper, it's more stable, and is not affected or not subjective to electrical interference. So please check on those terminologies as you go through this, write them down, jot them down, and be certain that you know that. Okay, let's move on. Let's move to our wireless internet connection. Wireless connection are basically based on cellular technology. Again, cellular, your telephone, your cell phone, your smartphone, cellular technology. So all our wireless connections most times are based on our cellular technology. That's why we use the LTEs now. That's why we use the 3Gs, the 4Gs. All of them are all based on this concept of our cellular technology. So internet connection without an ADSL or a fiber line. So one good thing about the wireless connection is we don't need to have a line rented from our service provider. So in other words, we don't need to get another line from Telcom, another line from MTN in order for us to use our wireless connection. We use our wireless connection via 3G or 4G dongle on a desktop or a laptop to connect to cellular network for internet access, or we nowadays even connect via our LTE stations when we make use of a SIM card. The same SIM card you have in your smartphone can now be used as an access on your LTE connection in order for you to access the internet. Also, our smartphone and tablet use a personal Wi-Fi hotspot to connect all the devices also to the internet. So again, with my SIM in my phone, I can create a small hotspot. I can create a small wireless connection within me and then grant people around me access into the internet. So you can see the power of wireless connection. It's mobile, it's flexible, it's easy to create, it's easy to use, and that is why quite a lot of people also still go ahead with the wireless connection. So you can see clearly the difference between the two. Wired must have a line rented. You must have a dedicated line from Telcom to use a wired ADSL line. With fiber, you don't need to worry about the fixed landline, but again, you are still limited remotely to certain aspects. But when it comes to wireless, you're free to move. You connect everywhere you go. You can use dongle or 4G dongle on your desktop or on your laptop to connect to the network, or you can use your basic SIM using what you call the SIM modems that we have now in order for you to connect to the internet. So a lot of service providers like Telcom, a service provider like service provider like MTN, ATA, Celsi, all provide wireless connections for our use. So it's up to you which service provider you feel comfortable with. All right, but if I can add that the fastest speed on the wireless connection at the moment sits with Vodacom. So if you're considering having an internet access or internet wireless connection, I would suggest that to go with Vodacom. Okay. All right, main advantages of our wireless connection. Please bear in mind that it again based on our cellular technology. Main advantage is mobile access to the internet using a mobile device. We have a mobile access, which means we can move everywhere we go. Everywhere we go, we have a constant access, non-interrupted access to the internet using our mobile devices. But again, this type of connection, which is a wireless connection, has its own limitations. And one of the limitations is limited or slow access if your area is with a poor cellular coverage. So if you have a very bad cellular, or we call it signal, in your area, you might have a very, very slow internet access. So that's why sometimes on your phone, you will notice you would have LTE display on your connection link. You would have 3G, 4G display, and sometimes you have HPSA, sometimes you have even what you call 2Gs if you're still using the old BlackBerry phones. So that shows you have a slow access to the internet, and this is because of a poor cellular coverage in your area. And another disadvantage or limitation with wireless connection is you never escape communication. There's always what we call an information overload. Okay, so what do we mean by that? You're constantly on your phone, everybody can reach you, you can run away from people, and that is why we say there's an information overload. Even the things you don't need, the things you don't need to know, people share with you on your Facebook, on your WhatsApp. So that's exactly what we refer to as information overload. So that's one of the disadvantages or limitations of having a wireless connection. Because remember, if you do have a wired connection, you don't have to be worried about a WhatsApp message because you're not at home, you're not on that network. But the moment you have a wireless connection, you have a data on your phone, you have data on your phone, definitely you would have or you will be inundated with information, and that's why we refer to that as information overload. And the last thing is you might need to limit the amount of data you use, because the more you stay connected online, okay, I believe you see this last point, you might need to limit the amount of data that you use, because the more you stay online, the more data you use, and that can be expensive. I mean, it could a little bit be expensive. So that's why I say you might need to limit the amount of data, that you use. And those settings are possible on our smartphones, where we can set daily limits to our data. Otherwise, we might actually run out of data easily. Okay. Another wireless connection that I'm going to talk about today is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is popular terminologies amongst people, and these are a more convenient way of connecting to the internet. But what I want to say to you about this Wi-Fi is it's a way of connecting to an existing ADSL or fiber connection wirelessly. So it's not a network. It's not an internet access on its own. But I see a lot of people misuse this concept of Wi-Fi. They say, well, do you have Wi-Fi? Do you have data? Do you have Wi-Fi? It's just an extension of our ADSL or a fiber connection. So in other words, it's still based on a wired connection. That's not entirely a wireless connection. But always remember that the Wi-Fi is an extension. It's a range extension of our ADSL and fiber to places where cables cannot reach. So that's why we definitely do use a Wi-Fi. So always remember it's a way of connecting to an existing wired network, and that's why we refer to ADSL and fiber connection. It's a way of connecting to an existing ADSL or fiber connection. It's fairly small. It covers fairly small area of area, and that is why sometimes we refer to it as a hotspot. So for example, and if you've noticed this at School of Hope, we have a Wi-Fi in the front desk, we have a Wi-Fi in the admin block, and we have a Wi-Fi at the back wing of the school. So in other words, Wi-Fi only covers a small area, and that is why we refer to this small area as an hotspot. Okay, Wi-Fi at the public hotspot can provide a cheaper and free access. So that's why government sometimes will provide free access to internet via a Wi-Fi or public hotspot. I remember many years in the garden, the city of Cape Town was allowing people to have a free access to the internet via a public domain, a public hotspot, which is being owned by the city of Cape Town. Okay, and also Wi-Fi can use ADSL or fiber router to create its own Wi-Fi network. So in other words, I can create my own Wi-Fi network. I can name a Wi-Fi in my name, which I have created for my ADSL or for my fiber router. Its password is needed for the first time you connect a device to it. So in other words, most of our smartphones are designed in a way that they can remember the password of Wi-Fi's that they have previously been connected to. So that's a great thing about Wi-Fi. So it doesn't mean every time you go back to the same hotspot, the same Wi-Fi, you need to always know the password. Once you sign it once, you'll be able to automatically connect whenever you go. Your device will also dictate other Wi-Fi networks. So in other words, your smartphone are able to detect Wi-Fi easily because they are a wireless connection, whether or not it has internet access. but it's still a connection. So most of the time you find your phone actually connecting to any possible Wi-Fi or giving you notifications of any detected Wi-Fi in the area. Okay. Also, we're able to access internet using our smartphone and tablets. People prefer data transmission that is always on, everywhere, fast, reliable, and hassle-free. So on our smartphone, that's what we want, and that is why a service provider who gives us our telephone lines, who gives us our cell phone lines, also provide internet access at the same time, because we always want to be on. I always want to be on the internet so that I can get notification of any messages from me at any time. I want a fast and reliable one, and I want a very hassle-free internet connection. So that's why it's more convenient nowadays to connect through the internet via your smartphones and your tablets. Okay. You can also furthermore, people expect their mobile devices to always be on, and I want us to really quickly dwell on this concept. Always on, it's a concept where technologies are left on without having to switch them off all the time. They're constantly working. Think about the computers in the computer lab. We don't switch them off. They're constantly online. Think about our laptops, our smartphone. We don't switch them off. They're constantly on. So that's what we refer to as a terminology, which we call always on. So laptop has to boot up and wake up from a sleep mode before you can use them, and must then wait to connect to a Wi-Fi and plug in a 3G or 4G modem in order for you to access the internet. So laptop is a typical example. We don't switch them off. They're always on. They're always on. So I want you to remember this terminology quite well. Always on. It's also another terminology that will be tested in your national exam. These delays are the difference between using your mobile devices and traditional computer devices. So what we mean by this is always on it's a time frame in between using your mobile phone and the traditional computing devices. So the difference between having to put on a computer manually and waiting for it to boot, as compared to having your mobile devices that is constantly on, never switched off. People want this convenience, and that's why people go for mobile devices like your smartphone and tablets nowadays. Then also people prefer to always be connected. I always want to stay connected. To tell you when you're being communicated to via phone, SMS, instant messages, email, and VoIP services, it's a great deal now. It's a great deal for youngsters. It's a great deal for learners. People want to be constantly online, connected, being able to like and, being able to share certain information over our social media platform. So that's why people prefer an internet access that will always keep them connected. So also remember this concept, always connected, being able to be communicated to via your phone, SMS, instant message, and email or VoIP anytime. And that's when one says we are connected, always connected. Okay. How does this work? How does this always on, how does internet connection on our smartphone, how does it work? Most mobile devices have a built-in 3G or 4G cellular technology and the hardware to connect to any standard Wi-Fi technology. So that is why the smartphone and the tablets are popular now, because they have this technology, a 3G or a 4G technology built into them. You don't have to buy them as an external device, and they have the power or the hardware to connect to a standard Wi-Fi network. And who can remember or recall which hardware allows you to connect to a network? That is your NIC card, your NIC card, your network interface controller card. So always just try and apply your mind, what you've learned in the past, towards whatever concept we are learning at grade 12. So you're able to connect to internet using cellular technology whenever a cell phone signal is available. So wherever there is cell phone signal, you have access to internet. And that's one great deal about our smartphones. You also automatically switch over to a Wi-Fi connection whenever one is also available. So you would see sometimes we make settings on our smartphone when we say, if I need to download, use Wi-Fi. But if it's just ordinary stay on, you can use my data from my phone. So this capability or this hardware are built in a way that they can sense when there's a cell phone signal and they're connected to it, and also they can sense when there's a Wi-Fi connection, and they can also connect when one is available. So let's talk about a Wi-Fi versus a cellular. Usually only an issue for tablets. Models with Wi-Fi only are less expensive. So most times on our tablet, I believe many of you use the iPads of the school, you would notice that it's only Wi-Fi only. It does not have a cellular connection. So most of those tablets are quite or less expensive. It's easy and affordable. But and the reason for that is because they're only designed to connect to a Wi-Fi, to sort of wireless internet connection. So they don't have cellular based. But also there are mix of iPads and tablets that has both a Wi-Fi and a cellular capability. So it's up to you how much you're willing to spend on devices like that. Also makes more sense to get a model with cellular data so you can access the internet wherever you are. So if I'm to buy any of these iPads or tablets, I would prefer to have a one with the cellular data, and that's why the smartphones are selling, because they have both the capability of a Wi-Fi and your cellular network. So have it at the back of your mind when you need to purchase all of this. Sometimes rather go for an option where you can use cellular data, which will be your SIM card, and at the same time you can also still use your Wi-Fi, which will mostly be available wherever you find yourself. Okay, so we're just enriching on why people prefer to have devices like that. Okay, so that's that on internet connection. Now let's look at internet services. What are sort of services that we can get over the internet? There's way a lot of services that is available on the internet. So a lot of us now are used to what we call a real-time messaging. Real-time messaging is an instant messaging, which means message at our fingertips, message that can be delivered immediately to the recipients. So we have an instant messaging or chat. Example of that, your WhatsApp today, your Facebook chat today, your Hangouts, all of those popular instant messages that we have. Also, we could also send real-time messaging in form of SMS. We could also have, again, I mentioned earlier, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, and Twitter DM. And also we can join chat rooms. And these are all examples of real-time messaging which we get in form of internet services. If I can go back, internet services, as a matter of fact, that we are connected to the internet. So these are services that we pay for. These are services that we receive being part of internet. Okay, so always bear that in mind. Example of real-time messaging: WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook, their Twitter DMs, SMS, and so on and so forth. Other services, or before we go into other services, let's talk about advantages of real-time messaging. Chat in real time with more than one person at a time, so we can talk, we can be in a group chat, we can all hear what everybody's chipping in at any point in time. We can interact with people regardless of our location. I mean, look at the beauty of what we are doing. I'm being able to communicate with you via this platform, and you've been able to receive it wherever you are without having to be in the same location. It can be used over a variety of operating systems. So if you're using an Apple phone, if you're using a Android phone, you can use all of these services. It's very cost effective, which means you get a value of the money that you spent, and can indicate if you are available to chat or not. So again, you can set your privacy the way you want it. So for example, you would see on a display on our WhatsApp, we say available to chat, but no phone calls. I can also add even indications like I'm in a meeting. So that are all possible with real-time messaging. Can easily switch from chat to voice or video. When I do a video call, I can switch to a voice call. When I do a voice call, I can easily switch to a video call. It all depends on what I want to be and or want to do. And also there are additional features like playing games. It's possible on social medias now to play games. Things about your Fortnite, thinking about your Roblox and all of those things. They're example of real-time messaging that we get now. We're able to play games and chat and talk and invite people and socialize on social on platforms now, which is these things were not possible many years ago. So it's a great thing that we have in all of this. So think about these as all advantages of real-time messaging that we find as part of services that we receive from the internet. Okay. But again, what are the limitations? I rather use the word limitations than use the word disadvantages at grade 12 level. We have control. We have no control to ensure that people who they claim to be, we don't know. We're not sure. People can display a different picture and be somebody else. So again, that comes to people's identity online cannot be verified easily. So you've got to be very careful who you're chatting to. Can lead to an antisocial behavior. There's now cyberbullying, there's cyber stalking, there's identity theft. So all of this real-time messaging platforms can create opportunities for cyber stalking, cyberbullying, identity theft, and so on and so forth. So you've got to be very careful when you are on this platform. Okay, so sometimes they ask you, give 3 limitations of the use of real-time messaging. Remember, can lead to antisocial behavior. That should be the quick one to get to your head. Again, you have no control over people that you're chatting with. They can tell you, I'm in hubs, but they're actually in Cape Town. So all of those things is you can see it easily. So you've got to be very careful about that. The other service we're going to look into, which is we've taught a little bit in grade 11, is voice over internet protocol, VoIP we call it. It's technology that allows telephone calls to be made over LANs, WANs, and the internet. So a typical example of your VoIP is Skype or your WhatsApp call. WhatsApp call is taking over the internet now. But many years ago, Skype was the popular one. So again, it's a technology that allows telephone calls, voice calls to be made over the LANs, WANs, and the internet, or that allows telephone calls to be made over the internet. Make it quite simple for yourself. Okay, voice is transmitted on a network, whether it's a wireless network, whether it's a wired network. There is communication. Voice is easily transmitted. Conference call technology, you're able to speak to many people at the same time. You can see the power of WhatsApp. We can do a group call, we can do a group video call, irrespective of our geographical locations and so on and so forth. So always understand that our Skype, our WhatsApp, or our FaceTime video calls and Skype calls, voice calls, use the power of VoIP. So this is a concept, the VoIP, voice over internet protocol. It's a concept that is tested always in national papers. So please ensure that you understand a basic definition of what we mean by voice over internet protocol. Okay. Advantages of it: VoIP calls are cheaper than our normal phone calls. Even now possible on your smartphone, you can enable what you call VoIP calls, so you don't really use your voice calls minutes that is being given to you. You actually use your WhatsApp or your data to place calls, which is the new features that we now find on our smartphones. The software is generally free. You can see our Skype is free, our WhatsApp is free to download from app stores, and it allows you to transfer files and make video conference calls as well. So again, we're able to share pictures on it, we're able to share music on it, all sort of medias on it, and at the same time we can also make video conferencing calls over them. Okay, so bear that in mind. It is a great example of or a great advantages of VoIP. But again, it has its own shortcomings, it has its own limitations. You always need internet connection for both users in order for you to use the technology. So in other words, if you're placing a call and you have data, and you're placing a call to someone who doesn't have data, then the person may not receive your phone calls. So you always have to ensure that there's internet connection, there's enough data for both users in order for you to place a connection between the two of you. You also need to purchase credit to call phones not on the internet. So for example, if you're going to phone a landline, if you're going to phone someone who is not on the same WhatsApp or the same platform of Skype like you, then you need to purchase additional credit for that. Call quality may be poor if your internet connection is poor. So if your internet connection is slow and is not going well, your voice call will crack, your voice call will be slow, your voice call will not be clear or crystal clear enough for you to understand what you're saying to the other person and what the other person is saying to you, and also can easily use up data cap, especially when using video. So be careful if you have a capped data. Remember, we refer to capped and uncapped internet access. If you have a capped internet access, be careful of doing video calls because these may use up your data quite quicker than what you expected. So always look at things like that. Video conferencing, it's a new terminologies now. With the lockdown, everybody is using video conferencing. Even the president and the ministers meeting, they are no longer doing physical meetings now. They are using video conferencing. So what is video conferencing? Video conferencing allows two or more people to hold online conferences at different locations. Look at that word, at different locations, using computer network to transmit audio and video as if they were all in the same room. So the concept of being able to communicate using videos and voice like you are in the same room is exactly what we call video conferencing. So each participant must have their own webcam, microphone, speakers linked to their computer. So the same thing I'm using as I speak, I have my headphone on, I have my microphone, I have my speaker, and I have my webcam to be able to video the content that is being taught. So the same concept applies to video conferencing. So let's look at the advantages of video conferencing. People you are communicating with are visible. You can see their facial expression, you can see what they're doing, you can see their location, and so forth and so forth and so so forth. It's cheaper than normal phone calls or traveling for the meeting, so you don't have to travel for the meeting. You can just as well discuss whatever you want to discuss. That's why we call it conferencing. You've been able to discuss business and matters of urgent attention easily without having to travel to the respective location. Disadvantages of video conferencing: video and audio quality can be poor on a slow internet connection. So if your internet connection is slow, there's possibility that your video or your audio quality can also be poor, and you can use a lot of data, especially using video. So always bear in mind that the moment you want to see the other person, the moment you want to place a video call, you would require a lot of data. You would require a lot of data to use in that aspect. But again, let's quickly talk about good practices when doing video conferencing. This, you would have seen a lot of this going around in social media now when we're using the concept called work from home. That's a concern because what you find most of the time is people interrupt, the kids come, so things get interrupted sometimes, or people see what they're not supposed to see via a video conference. So let's talk about good practices when doing video conferencing. Most importantly, work in a well-lit location. There must be enough lighting. There must be enough light in order for the other person to see you. Protect your privacy. Make sure you know what your camera can see. Know where your camera is focused on, so that the person on the other side is not seeing exactly what they should not be seeing. Test your sound and video before making a call. So you need to make all your settings and everything before you make the call. So very carefully, and also make sure you get yourself in a more secluded place, in a more closed place where there will be less interruption from your family or from other colleagues that you may have on the premises. Okay, so let's look at more internet services. The other internet services we are again using is cloud computing. So cloud computing is an example of what I'm using on Google Classroom, where I've been able to store content, materials for you and videos for you in order for you to access it at your own convenient time. So what is cloud computing? Cloud computing is the sharing and the use of resources and applications offered as services over the internet. So again, sharing and the use of resources and applications offered as services over the internet. For example, you can share this classroom platform with me online. So that's example of cloud computing. Online storage of files, web-based Gmail, email, and programs that run on servers over the internet make use of online cloud computing. So it's another word, it's computer virtually sitting online, sitting on the internet. And when you have data, you can connect. When I have data, I can connect to it, and we can share resources on this. So cloud computing is also refers to online storage of files, web-based email, and programs that run on servers on the internet. You would see Amazon rents and provide online computer resources. For example, you can read books online, you can watch movies online. Netflix use cloud computing. Google Drive use cloud computing. So all of those things are being able to use as long as you have internet connection, and these are shared resources which you find available over the internet. So that's exactly what cloud computing is. It's the sharing and the use of resources, computer, storage space, programs, web-based word processing, spreadsheet presentation. As I speak to you, I'm using the Google presentation services to communicate with you. So that's example of what we mean by cloud computing. So when you use all of these services that we mentioned, like on your Gmail, your email, if you use your Google Drive, your Amazon Web Services, you are making use of cloud computing. So always please get this very clearly, because it's also a question in your national exam. What are the advantages? Softwares are always up to date. You don't have to worry about a patch file. You don't have to worry about a service pack. All your softwares are always up to date. What you use in South Africa is the same software that is being used in the States. So bear that in mind. You don't have to download or install any software. You don't have to have your Microsoft Office installed, because you make use of the Google Docs, which you find online. So you don't have to install any software at all. You can use the software and access your data anywhere. So that's why whatever I store now in this classroom, you can access it anywhere. That's the power of cloud computing. Software does not take up space on your local computing. So as I upload all of these resources, I don't need to physically store it in my hard drive in my computer again. So it does save us space on your local computer or your laptop. Server may be more powerful than your own CPU itself. So which means this server or this computer that we are all storing things on online, it's way more powerful than our own computer. That makes it easy for us to interact with that server. We can share document with other users. That's why I can share document with every one of you, and also document get backed up by the system. So I don't have to worry if it's deleted from my computer, if someone pressed delete by mistake. The great thing is it's automatically backed up on this server online. Okay, but let's look at these advantages. The bad thing about cloud computing is only effective if you have a fast and reliable internet connection. So you've got to make sure you have enough data when you want to access Google Classroom, because otherwise you might not be able to access the content easily. No longer have full control over security of your data and backup policy. So which means I cannot tell Google what to do with regards to what I've stored there, although I own it. But the reality is I have no control, or what you call full control, over the security of my data. I may have to pay a monthly fee. For example, to use Google Classroom, we have to set it up so it comes at a fee. So always bear that in mind. Although there are free ones, but sometimes if you do want it to work exactly for your own will, you may have to pay a monthly fee. Software might not have all the features or capabilities of locally installed software. So that's also a limitation. Certain things I don't find easily on the Google spreadsheets or on the Google presentation software. So sometimes that's a bit of a challenge, but always bear in mind that these are online or web-based software. It will not run properly like the one that you've installed locally on your computer. Also might run slower depending on the speed of your internet connection. So depending on the speed you have on your smartphone, depending on the speed you have on your computer, it may also not accessing these files may also be a bit of a challenge, as you might run at a glitch or run see that you access it at a very slower pace. But always understand that that is based on the speed of your internet connection. Okay, so that's that on cloud computing. But again, there's another term which you call online storage. So look at that word storage: keeping your data, keeping your files and folders online. That's just basically what it means. So keeping your data in the cloud. And when we say in the cloud, not our physical cloud, it means in a computer somewhere. Okay, so which means anywhere you are, as long as you have internet connection, you're able to access your data. And that's exactly what we mean by online storage. So example of online storage that we use is what we call the Microsoft OneDrive, which is available free of charge. You can have up to 15 gig on the cloud under OneDrive. Then we have the Google Dropbox also, which is Google Drive, which you can also make use as an online storage. Most of them are basically free, but if you do want a bigger space, you might need to buy some space at an additional cost to you. So how do we get online storage? You have to download and install the service app on your device. If you're going to use Google Drive, then you have to install Google Drive on your phone or on your device. And again, you have to sync specific local folder on your device. So again, you have to choose what folder, what files you like to store on the cloud. So I need to sync it, means I need to send it up here. What is stored on my local folder must be the same thing that I will find on my Dropbox or on my OneDrive on the cloud. Okay, and you can share files by sending a link to the files with people that you want to share it with. So you would see when I wanted to give you access to the classroom or to Google Classroom, I asked for your email and I sent you a link or which would take you directly to what I have shared with you on the Google Classroom. So at the moment using online storage via Google Classroom to store data as resources for you to access. And that's exactly what we are making good use of now. All right, what are the advantages of online storage? It's a very simple, cost-effective way to share and transfer files. So you don't have to physically get a flash, physically get a CD or everything. You automatically can share or transfer files at a very cost-effective way with people across the world. That's actually a powerful thing. File extensions are not blocked, so you can upload or share any type of file, whether it's a Microsoft Word file, which is Microsoft Excel file, it doesn't matter. So this is not blocked. Online storage system backs up your file, so it keeps a copy somewhere. Should in case you mistakenly delete those files on your computer, you can easily just download it back to your local hard drive. You can save space on your local hard drive. For example, everything that I have on this computer that is stored on my online storage, I delete from my local computer because there's no point, so that I can free more space on my local hard drive. Can use online storage system to synchronize your files. So again, these softwares are able to synchronize files online and with what we have on our computer and across all of the devices that we have connected. So for example, the files that I have online in the Google Classroom, I can access on my smartphone, and at the same time, I can access on any computer as long as I have access to internet connection. Okay, so always bear that in mind. Also, and a question in your national paper. Disadvantages: amount of space allocated for saving files can quite be small for free usage, and you must pay additional subscription in order for you to get extra space. So mostly I told you earlier on that on Google Drive and OneDrive, you get about 15 gig free, but if you're going to use more than that, you would then have to pay a subscription. People you have shared folders with can remove your files by mistake. So again, when you share folders with people, you've got to be careful that you don't grant them an administrative right to edit. They can view, but they cannot edit all of your files. Otherwise, they may remove your files by mistake. But again, remember I told you that these are all backed up, so easily you may be able to recover it easily, even if it's mistakenly deleted by someone that you share the file with. All right. So again, another internet service that we get a lot is file sharing, which is an email attachment. Most of us would have heard the word attach it to my emails, send the file via email. So email attachment is a very inexpensive way of transferring files and is relatively a fast method. So it's just easy. You attach a file or a folder to your email and you send it to somebody else. So that's how it basically works. The disadvantages is not suitable for large files. So when it's too big, it tells you unable to transfer it. So you have to use more protocol, which we will talk about in a moment. Some email system blocks certain file extension like your zip or exe. So sometimes they don't want a zip file. Not always secure. The users may have access and restrictions on the number of recipients. So sometimes you might only be able to send it to 10 people, to 12 people, to 4 people, depending on the condition of the email service that you are using. Okay. Also, sometimes not easy or efficient when sharing with many people. So be careful with email attachment. But again, I would say it's a very good system. It's a very inexpensive way of sending files. But bear in mind that it may not be easy or efficient when sharing with many people. So if you're going to share a big file, then you need to use what we call a file transfer protocol, which is called the FTP. This is also a terminology that you find in national paper in June exam, in your trial exam. So what does FTP means? File Transfer Protocol. It's a protocol used for the transfer of files between remote computers with an internet connection. So remote computer means they are in various locations, maybe across the building, but all of these computers have internet access. So in other words, you're able to transfer files from one computer to another via the internet. Okay, so many of you would have heard me saying I'm pulling something out of my computer in my office into the computer lab. That's exactly what we mean by file transfer protocol. So files are uploaded to an FTP server or downloaded from NTP server. So to have to use a file transfer protocol, you have to install an FTP server. So in other words, that's the server that will receive the files and keep it away. And that's the same server that you download the files from whenever you need them. So again, cloud storage services like OneDrive have largely taken over this function for most users. So in other words, now that we have online storage like OneDrive or Google Drive free of charge, people are starting to move away from the FTP protocol because OneDrive, Google Drive are way cheaper, easier way to store things remotely without having to worry of losing them. Okay, but because remember, if you install the FTP server within the building, if there's a fire in the building, all of your files is gone. But when you store things online, it's there on the cloud, so you're not prone to the danger of data theft or prone to the danger of fire in the building. All of your files are stored remotely online, and that gives you a bit of a peace of mind as compared to using what you call the FTP protocol. But again, these are still concepts that is being tested because people are still using it. So make sure you have a clear understanding of it. And if you do have questions around it, please send it through to me, and then we can always talk about it on the Google Classroom platform. Okay. Then a very important concept that I would also want you to master, which is also part of our internet service, is grid computing. Grid computing is a question in every national paper every year. So please ensure that you master or have a clear understanding of this terminology. Okay, so what is grid computing? It's resources of different computers. It is when, let's put it this way, it is when the resources of different computers are shared and used at the same time to solve a single problem. In other words, increases the total processing power of a computer. So in other words, when we draw into the power of many computers connected over the internet, okay, and then we use it at the same time to solve a single problem. So for example, if we needed to send something across to the internet, or if we needed to share a very large file over the internet, then we are making good use of grid computing. So remember, grid, it means like a database of computers, and when we bring those powers together and then use it for one thing, then that's exactly what grid computing means. So a typical thing is, if you think about it in this way, if I get 10 boys to move a desk from one classroom to another, they look at the power of 10 boys moving the desk. They will be able to move it at a very fast rate, as opposed to having one person trying to move the desk from one class to another. So I'm just giving you a more literal analogy of it. Okay, so grid computer is used for scientific and technical applications that require large amount of data to be processed, or high processing power. So you just don't use it. It's not easy for me to use the power of your computer and somebody else's computer to do something that I want to do. So it's mostly used for scientific or technical applications that require large amount of data to be processed, or high processing power. For example, if I need to use Google Earth to get or zoom into a terrorist house, for example, I'm just saying, then I need the power of many computers in order for me to be able to clearly control that satellite footage over where I want to see. So I'm just using that as a way to explain it to you. Example of grid computing: a scientist can use an entire network of computers to analyze the data, which makes the analysis of data done quicker. A businessman can access an entire network of computers to forecast the growth of the particular stock. So if a manager of Woolworth, for example, sits in his office and try and access all of his sales on all the computers across the branches and try and see, okay, which product is selling, that's using grid computing to analyze the growth of a particular stock. Example of grid computing you would find on a global community scale. We have the home project, we have the radioactive at home. These are all platforms where you can learn a little bit more about grid computing, but please just master the concept and be able to give examples of it. So remember, I always mention, when you define concept, you need to provide an example. So for me, if I define what is grid computing, I would say it's when resources of different computers are used at the same time to solve a single problem. And I will say, for example, when scientists use an entire network of computers to analyze data. So please always be ready to give an example of the concept that you are explaining. Okay, so that's a way to do it. Advantages of grid computing: cost-effective solution with the ability to use many resources. So I don't have to physically use one computer at a time. I can draw onto the resources of this computer and use them at once. So it's very cost effective. It provides a method to solve problems that needs a lot of processing power. So we use application power, we use scientific and computational power to solve problems. Also, it saves money and resources by using the power of idle computers. So in other words, there are computers sometimes that sit on our networks at work, at school, at department, that doesn't do anything. So because they are connected to a network, we can draw on their processing power in order for us to be able to reach to a solution as quickly as we can. Okay. Disadvantages: a fast network connection between the computers and network is important. If your internet connection or your network connection is slow, you might find it very difficult to use grid computing. The computers that are used may not be fast enough or might even slow down the process. So again, you should have tested this well before you would use it to solve or to analyze or to process particular data. Otherwise, sometimes you might see that it's even slower. Okay, the computers may also be affected by malware infections, so you've got to be careful that you're not using computers who's got virus, computers that's got malwares, who's got worms, and all the shortcut virus. And that might also set you back. So be careful that you've checked the conditions of this computer before you draw them into a grid to use. All right, so that's all of the internet services that we've talked about. So again, I'd like to go back. We've talked about grid computing. We talked about file transfer protocol. We've talked about file sharing using the email attachment. We've talked about online storage. We've talked about cloud computing. We've talked about video conferencing, VoIP, and real-time messaging. So those are the internet services that what's needed for you to learn at this level towards your national exam. So, but before we go, let's give examples of internet services. So in other words, let's give example of internet services provided by the government that you can find around you in South Africa. So for example, government internet service like a renewal of TV licenses and post office boxes that's available online for us. Election information access online via EMS when we need to vote. That's example of government internet service. Up-to-date info and forms that you find on government websites and so on and so forth. UIF, Unemployment Insurance Fund, tax details added and updated. Even now, we can even do tax filing via e-filing. So those are example of government services that are provided online. We could log into our telephone account via Telcom to check what is our bill. Educational publications and documents are now available online. You could see that on the Google Classroom, I've given you access to the database of past question papers that has been written from 2013 to 2019. So that's example of educational document that is also available on government websites. Our passport and ID document, us being able to apply for it online, is also showing you that government has internet services that are provided for us online. So these are all examples that you can give. If there's a give example of 3 examples of government internet services available to you as a South African citizen. Okay, so bear that in mind. Government internet services, advantages of it: better communication between government departments and citizens, access to services anytime, anywhere, any place, no long queues or long travel distance to renew licenses and all of those things. You get immediate feedback online, easier access to up-to-date information and document, increased efficiency and lower cost. Many sites and services can be accessed via your smartphones as well. Less need for hard copies, and these actually promote green computing. So all of these are also clearly stated in your PowerPoint slides that I've also loaded onto this Google Classrooms. All right. What are the limitations or obstacles? There's the digital divide. An example of that is we don't have equal access to internet. So for example, some of us were able to easily access this Google Classroom while others are still struggling because they don't have internet access. So most of the obstacle or most of the limitations of citizens accessing government internet services are the digital divide. It means, a greater number of us has access, while a greater number of us do not have access to services. So that's what we call the digital divide. The initial cost to develop this site is also a concern for government. concerns about the security and privacy and the use of information. That is why many shops who conduct businesses online will tell you that they will not pass on your information to a third party. You can feel as though you are at the mercy of technology. So sometimes people get frustrated. Oh, why must we always wait for this technology and all of those things? So things like that. Blame technology for what might actually be human error. Sometimes people blame. So I would say, have you noticed sometimes you go to the government department to renew your license or to get a car disc or anything, and they tell you, but the system is not working. But sometimes the systems are working, but human error I don't want to be pointed out. So what people do is they blame technology, and when sometimes it can be their own error, or maybe your name is misspelled in your ID, they say, well, the computer is messing up, but actually that's an human error. The computer didn't type the name. It was someone who actually typed the name. So those are some of issues around government internet services in South Africa. Two systems need to be maintained: the traditional manual system and the electronic self-service system. So this is becoming overwhelming from the departments or for government agencies to work on, because again, they have to physically store your information and at the same time store your information again online. So that's exactly some of the obstacles or limitations of using a government internet access. So that brings us right to the end of this. And this is where we test and improve our knowledge. And bear in mind that there is a module activity. The questions and answers are already there, which is loaded on Google Classroom. After you've watched this video, please kindly go and attempt and read over those materials. You don't have to download it, you don't have to print it out. Just slide and read through it in your own time, on your smartphones or on your computers at home, and then try and test yourself on module 2.1, which is the network and the internet model, and see what you can score. And I will again be coming up with questions and see who our needs are. But if you do need any helps, you can drop a line for me on the stream. If you click on the stream on the Google Classroom, you would see, I just want to demonstrate that for you again quickly. If you go to our classroom, you will see stream. So if there's any sort of questions, you can actually just type anything here for me to send any sort of message to me. And also you can find details of anything that has been loaded. If there's any new materials that has been loaded, this is where you would find it. A click. So by clicking on it, it will take you directly to that thing. But again, here is a classroom. Here is a model that we've just done. I've actually added a test recording earlier on. So I would take that down and actually load this video easily for you to watch. But remember, we've looked at the internet connection services. So I would load the video here for you to watch, which will be linked to a YouTube. But again, here is a slide. Here is the questions and all of the answers that you may require. But again, if you do need some help or clarification, I'm available to speak to you via the stream, or if you like, via the WhatsApp channel. Okay. And please, if I've sent you an invitation, please go and accept the invitation, as I won't be able to attend to you if you're not connected to me. But however, I will still try my best to be in touch with you via the WhatsApp group. And the beauty of it is, if you attempt those tests, you will definitely be able to see your score here, and then we can look at which particular questions learners are struggling with. So test yourself if you like on term 1 module, which is module 1.1 to 1.3, or if you like, test yourself on module 2.1, which is this one here, and have a go on these questions to ensure that you can what is really going on in those models. So I would load all the materials and everything that you need, and hopefully you will be able to carry on. So test yourself on module 2.3. You'll see the Google form here, which you will have to attempt. I can see 2 people turned in, 9 assigned, so I'm waiting on more people. And once you take the test easily, I will be able to mark and see which is the best or what's your performance like. So grade 12, this is where we're gonna have to meet and talk for the next 3 weeks. I hope you enjoyed this video and engage, as this is the only way that is possible for us to reach to ourselves at this point in time. If you need to join the classroom, and this is the code to join the classroom. So if you sign into your Gmail and you go into the, I'll show you quickly now. And if you go into these cubes here, okay, it's a small little cube on this side. I'm just gonna try and move the thing. You see the small little square, and then if you scroll down, you will find classroom. And when you click on classroom, it will bring you to this very particular platform. So try and engage well with this platform, and I hope I'll see you soon. Thank you for your time and for listening to this video. Thank you.